Imagine this. You're 7 months pregnant, surrounded by friends, family, and flowers at what's supposed to be the happiest day of your life, a baby shower. And then your husband walks in with his mistress, in front of everyone. Cameras flashing, smiles fading, your heart shatters. But what if I told you she didn't crumble? She rose. And what came next, no one saw coming. Trust me, stay until the end. The most shocking twist? It's still ahead. Now, let me tell you what really happened. The room was a masterpiece. Elegant flower arrangements in pale pink and ivory, strings of tiny golden lights twinkling above, and the faint aroma of vanilla-scented candles filling the air. Guests buzzed with excitement, champagne flutes in hand, laughter echoing off the high ceilings of the luxurious Westchester estate. Everyone had gathered to celebrate the upcoming arrival of Emily Lancaster's first child. The baby shower was meant to be a dream come true. Instead, it became a public disaster, a betrayal so savage, so humiliating, it would make headlines. Emily stood near the gift table, one hand resting protectively on her 7 months pregnant belly. She wore a soft peach maternity dress that draped gracefully over her bump. Her smile was gentle, reserved, the kind that concealed a heart growing heavy with suspicion. For the past few weeks, Emily had sensed something was off. Her husband, Brandon Lancaster, had grown distant. Late nights at the office, vague explanations, the way he flinched when she touched his phone. It all painted a picture she wasn't ready to accept. Brandon, a 36-year-old real estate tycoon, had built a reputation as one of Manhattan's most charismatic entrepreneurs. Tall, chiseled, and always impeccably dressed, he had that dangerous combination of wealth, charm, and confidence. He made deals with the flick of a wrist and seduced boardrooms with his voice. When he walked into the baby shower, 40 minutes late, wearing designer sunglasses and his signature navy suit, Emily's heart skipped a beat. Not from affection. From dread. On his arm was a woman. Not a family member. Not a friend. A woman no one recognized, but everyone instantly understood. She was breathtaking. Tall, model thin, her jet black hair cascading down her back like a shampoo commercial. Her scarlet dress hugged every inch of her figure with unapologetic boldness. She was smiling, holding Brandon's arm like she belonged there. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. Emily froze. For a moment, no one spoke. Then came the whispers. Is that his assistant? I heard he's been seen with her in the city. Oh my God. At the baby shower? Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers clenched the edge of the table. The nausea that struck her wasn't from pregnancy this time. Brandon walked up to her with the swagger of a man completely unashamed. Honey, he said with a wide grin, you remember Celine? Celine. The name hit Emily like ice water. That was the assistant Brandon had hired 6 months ago. The one with no professional experience, but an endless Instagram feed of bikini photos and luxury travel. Emily stared at him, then at Celine, who extended a manicured hand and said with syrupy sweetness, so lovely to finally meet you, Emily. You look comfortable. The insult was deliberate. Emily didn't shake her hand. She didn't speak. She looked at her husband, her voice low but trembling with fury. What is this, Brandon? Brandon shrugged, as if it were all a misunderstanding. Relax, she's just here as a friend. It's a party, right? Everyone's welcome. Emily's best friend Natalie stepped forward, glaring at Brandon. You brought your mistress to your wife's baby shower? Brandon rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic. We're adults here. Emily couldn't breathe. Her cheeks burned. Her baby kicked inside her as if reacting to the chaos. She could hear the cameras clicking. Someone was filming this. Celine leaned in, whispering into Brandon's ear, then kissed him lightly on the cheek. Brandon laughed. And that was it. Emily turned, grabbed the edge of the dessert table, and swept the entire 3-tiered cake onto the floor with one swift motion. Gasps turned to shrieks as frosting splattered onto designer heels and shattered glass scattered across the floor. The room fell silent. Emily's voice was steady, cold. Get out, both of you. Brandon blinked. Excuse me? You heard me, Emily said, now speaking to the room. This man is not the father I want for my child, and she pointed at Celine, is not welcome in this home. Celine scoffed. You're being hormonal. Emily's eyes narrowed. No, I'm being done. People began pulling out their phones. The live feed on social media exploded. Brandon Lancaster's baby shower scandal was trending within the hour. Celine tried to speak again, but Emily raised her hand. You don't get to talk anymore. You're a guest at a party meant for my baby, and you've shown up uninvited, clinging to a man who clearly doesn't know what loyalty means. Congratulations, you deserve each other. Brandon's face turned crimson. You don't know what you're doing. Emily took a deep breath and stood tall, her voice loud and clear. Actually, I do. You're not just some cheating husband. You're a coward, and starting today, I'm done protecting you. The door slammed behind them as Brandon and Celine left. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Emily turned back to her guests, straightened her shoulders, and smiled, this time without fear. Sorry about the mess. Who's ready for presents? It was the moment everything changed. The betrayal had broken her, but not beyond repair. And little did Brandon know, this was just the beginning. Before the betrayal, before the scandal, before the world knew her name, Emily Lancaster was just a woman trying to live a quiet, decent life. She wasn't born into privilege, didn't grow up with wealth, and never expected to marry into Manhattan's high society. She was 29, a freelance interior designer with a knack for turning modest spaces into warm sanctuaries. People always said she had a gift for bringing life into a room. Ironic, considering the life growing inside her now. Emily grew up in a small town in upstate New York. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a school librarian. They were kind, hard-working people who valued honesty over money and believed that you should always keep your word, even when it hurt. That's where Emily got her quiet strength. She was never flashy, never the type to chase attention. She'd wear soft sweaters instead of designer jackets, canvas totes instead of luxury handbags. But there was something about her that turned heads anyway. Maybe it was her almond-shaped eyes, always full of thought. Or maybe it was the way she listened when you spoke, like every word mattered. She moved to the city at 22 after graduating from a state university with a degree in design. For years, she lived in a tiny studio apartment above a noisy ramen shop, working odd jobs, bartending, assisting other designers, even doing delivery gigs just to keep the lights on. She never complained. She believed that life rewarded persistence. And then she met Brandon Lancaster. She was consulting on a minor renovation project in a lobby of a luxury condominium that Brandon's real estate firm had just acquired. Brandon, all tailored suits and sharp edges, was on site to check progress. He was different then, confident but not yet arrogant. He noticed Emily immediately. You have an eye for detail, he said, watching her adjust a lighting fixture. Emily laughed softly. Or maybe I just hate shadows in the wrong places. They had coffee that afternoon, then dinner, then a weekend trip to Montauk. It wasn't long before Brandon swept her off her feet with candlelit rooftops, handwritten notes, and whispered promises. I don't care about designer labels, he said one night, brushing her hair back. I care about you. The way you make a space feel like home. For a time, she believed him. When he proposed 6 months later with a modest ring and teary eyes, she said yes without hesitation. She didn't care that he didn't come from the same world as her family. She believed love was enough. Their wedding was private, just 40 guests in a garden surrounded by lanterns and wildflowers. Emily wore a simple silk gown. Brandon cried when he saw her walk down the aisle. Everyone said they were the perfect match. Beauty and ambition, grace and grit. They moved into a penthouse in Tribeca. Brandon's company began making headlines. His face was on magazine covers. Emily kept working, taking on smaller clients, decorating nurseries, cafes, and apartments for new couples. When she got pregnant, she was nervous. She had always wanted a family, but she worried it would interrupt Brandon's high-speed career. Instead, he surprised her. This baby is the best thing that could ever happen to us, he said, cradling her belly. We'll be a family, finally. He picked out nursery furniture. He ordered prenatal vitamins online. He even attended a Lemaze class, though he scrolled through his phone half the time. But then he changed. It started with harmless forgetfulness. He missed an appointment. He skipped lunch. He worked late. He claimed he had back-to-back meetings. Then came the excuses. I'm doing this for us, Emily. I need to provide. She didn't fight it, not at first. She wanted to believe. Then she found the lipstick stain on his dress shirt. It was subtle, almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. But it wasn't her shade. It was deeper, bolder. When she asked him about it, he laughed. You're imagining things. Maybe it's yours. You wear lipstick sometimes, right? She stopped wearing lipstick after that. She wanted to be wrong. She needed to be wrong. So she stayed quiet, told herself he was just stressed, told herself their love was stronger than suspicion. But Celine's name kept popping up, on receipts, on emails, on his schedule. Brandon and Celine, client dinner. Brandon and Celine, site visit. Brandon and Celine, weekend off-site retreat. Emily tried to trust him. She held her tongue. She made excuses for him at brunches and family gatherings. He's just busy. You know, real estate, it never sleeps. But she did what he never expected. She began documenting everything. The receipts, the photos, the credit card statements, the texts that slipped through when he forgot to lock his phone. She saved it all in a folder on her laptop labeled Nursery Plans. The Emily Brandon thought he married, the soft, sweet, quiet girl from upstate, was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone who had learned the hard way that loyalty without boundaries is a trap. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, she planned. She hired a private investigator. She spoke with lawyers. She reached out to Brandon's ex-business partner, the one Brandon had screwed over 2 years earlier. She didn't know exactly when she'd act, but she knew how. And when he walked into her baby shower with Celine on his arm, it was as if he had chosen the battleground for her. He thought he was humiliating her, but he had just set the stage for his own downfall. To truly understand the weight of Emily Lancaster's fall, one must understand the kingdom her husband had built, a glittering empire of stone, steel, and secrets. The Lancaster name wasn't just branded on skyscrapers and penthouses. It was branded on trust funds, political favors, and magazine covers. Brandon Lancaster's world was constructed with ruthless ambition and manicured charm. From the outside, he looked like a man who had it all. But the inside? The inside was cold marble and colder intentions. The Lancaster empire had its roots in real estate. Brandon's father, Charles Lancaster, was a blue-collar builder who transformed a small Brooklyn contracting firm into a multi-million-dollar development company. But it was Brandon who took it global. After graduating from Wharton, Brandon wasted no time making headlines. At 28, he bought out a flailing luxury condo project and flipped it into a landmark. At 30, he was named Manhattan's youngest powerhouse by Real Estate Monthly. By 32, he was a regular at political fundraisers and underground art auctions. He moved fast, spoke faster, and made people feel like they were in on a secret every time he smiled. His office, located on the 58th floor of the Lancaster Tower, was a sleek fortress. Glass walls, modern art, a bar cart that hadn't been touched since his PR team warned him about public image. His assistant, Celine, yes, that Celine, was the gatekeeper. She scheduled meetings with senators and fashion designers in the same breath. The Lancaster Tower itself was a symbol. It wasn't just Brandon's headquarters, it was the epicenter of his ego. A high-rise of power plays and backroom deals. Everyone who worked for him knew the rules. Never speak unless spoken to. Never question a decision. Always look like you're winning. Even when you were losing. Especially when you were losing. Brandon cultivated an image. The self-made mogul. The dream husband. The soon-to-be father. His Instagram featured carefully staged candids. Him cradling Emily's baby bump, sipping espresso at home, walking out of boardrooms with a purposeful scowl. But the truth behind those images was much darker. Behind the baby bump photos were fights about interrupting his schedule. Behind the espresso shots were 3 a.m. disappearances. Behind every staged smile was a man who didn't care about love, only optics. The Lancaster estate in Westchester, where the infamous baby shower took place, was another part of the performance. A $15 million colonial mansion reimagined with ultra-modern renovations, heated floors, biometric locks, Italian marble. Emily used to love the garden. It was the only part of the property that still felt like her. She designed it herself, lavender hedges, white roses, a stone bench where she often sat to feel the baby kick. But in the months before the baby shower, the mansion stopped feeling like home. It felt like a showroom. A place where Brandon could bring investors to impress, where Celine's perfume lingered too long on the stair rail, where security footage mysteriously glitched on the nights he claimed to be out of town. Emily noticed everything. She noticed how Celine's shoes started appearing at the front door, how the master bathroom suddenly had a second toothbrush, She noticed how Brandon no longer touched her belly, how he stopped asking how she felt. He had built an empire, and he thought she was just another pretty piece in it. But Emily had grown up watching what power did to men. She'd seen her uncle lose his marriage to a gambling habit disguised as business travel. She'd seen her mother cry quietly while balancing the checkbook after her father trusted the wrong friend. Emily knew men like Brandon. She just didn't want to admit she had married one. The deeper she dug, the uglier it got. Lancaster Holdings had multiple shell companies, most legal, some suspicious. Through a former intern turned whistleblower, Emily discovered one of those shells was paying Celine's rent. Another was covering first-class flights that never showed up on Brandon's public expense reports. And yet another was used to purchase a luxury penthouse 2 blocks from the Lancaster Tower, registered under Sunstone Realty LLC. Celine's Instagram geotags matched the penthouse view. Emily wasn't just being cheated on, she was being erased. But Brandon didn't know that Emily had been quietly gathering evidence for weeks. She met with a high-profile divorce attorney in secret. Not just any lawyer, but Marissa Crane, the same woman who took down a hedge fund titan last year and won his ex-wife $78 million. Marissa didn't flinch when Emily walked in. "You're not just a wife, Emily," she said after reviewing the case. "You're an asset to him, and assets can fight back." Together, they built a case. They documented financial misconduct, misappropriation of company funds, emotional abuse, infidelity. They had screenshots, photos, witnesses, and most importantly, they had a plan. Emily wouldn't file quietly. No, that would be too kind. Brandon made a spectacle out of betraying her, so she would return the favor on camera in front of his peers during the most public moment of his life. The baby shower was supposed to be that moment, but it ended in chaos. Still, the stage was set. The world now had a taste of the drama, and Emily had only just begun. If Brandon Lancaster was the architect of betrayal, Celine Monroe was the velvet hammer that helped drive every nail into Emily's back. She wasn't just a mistress. She was an opportunist, a strategist in stilettos. And while she may have entered Brandon's world as an assistant, she didn't plan to stay beneath him, figuratively or literally, for long. Celine Monroe was 27, ambitious, and beautiful, in the kind of way that made people stare without knowing why. Her looks weren't classic but curated. Sculpted cheekbones, eyebrows always arched with precision, lips full and practiced in pretending sincerity. She understood beauty as a weapon and used it with the precision of a sniper. Born in Tampa, Florida, to a waitress mother and a truck driver father, Celine grew up watching her parents drown in bills and bitterness. She swore early on she'd never live paycheck to paycheck. Her first job was at a tanning salon. Her second was at a VIP lounge in Miami, where she learned the art of flattery, seduction, and silence. By 22, she had already cycled through 3 sugar daddies, each more generous and gullible than the last. But Celine didn't just want a man who paid for her shoes. She wanted one who could elevate her. Brandon was perfect. She first saw him at a charity gala in Manhattan, a dazzling night of crystal chandeliers and whispered power plays. He was holding a bourbon, his tux perfectly tailored, his charm slicing through the room like a polished blade. He didn't even notice her that night. But she noticed him. She researched him obsessively afterward. His company, his wife, his routines. When Lancaster Holdings posted an opening for an executive assistant, Celine showed up with a forged resume, a fake MBA, and a tight white blouse that left nothing to the imagination. Brandon didn't even ask for a second interview. From day one, Celine made herself indispensable. She took every call, handled every schedule change, and started slipping compliments between calendar updates. "You're the smartest guy in the room," she'd whisper. "You deserve someone who actually sees that." Brandon took the bait. Within weeks, he was calling her late at night, allegedly to review numbers. Within 2 months, they were spending weekends at client properties. Within 3, she had a drawer in his penthouse and a Chanel bracelet he claimed he won in a raffle. Emily, pregnant and exhausted, never knew what hit her. But Celine knew. She knew Brandon's weaknesses, his ego, his fear of aging, his obsession with legacy. She knew how to stroke his ambition and stoke his resentment. She convinced him Emily was holding him back. Too quiet, too domestic, too unimpressed with his achievements. "She makes you small." Celine told him one night as they lay tangled in silk sheets. But you're not small, you're an empire, and empires need queens, not babysitters. Brandon believed her. He started skipping dinners at home, ignoring Emily's messages, whispering plans for a new life. He promised Celine a rebrand, a divorce, a public debut, even a summer wedding in Santorini once the timing was right. Celine was patient until the baby shower. She told Brandon to bring her. "Make it public. End it," she said, her voice silk over steel. "If you want me to be your future, stop pretending in front of your past." And so he did. What she didn't anticipate was Emily's composure, her fury, or the fact that the entire thing was caught on camera. Suddenly, Celine went from private power player to public enemy number one. In less than 24 hours, social media was ablaze. TikTok showing the cake crashing to the floor, Instagram Reels capturing Emily's ice-cold takedown, Twitter threads analyzing Brandon's arrogance and Celine's audacity. But what most people missed in the background of one viral video, barely noticeable, was Celine's face. For the first time, it wasn't smug. It was nervous. Because Celine had secrets, big ones. She wasn't just Brandon's assistant. She wasn't even a legal resident. Her work visa had expired 6 months ago, and Brandon had promised to take care of it. He hadn't, which meant Celine had been staying in the US illegally, traveling on Brandon's jet, staying in luxury penthouses, all while pretending to be something she wasn't. And there was more. A confidential NDA she'd signed upon employment with Lancaster Holdings that strictly forbade romantic relationships with senior executives. If revealed, it would not only cost Celine her job, it could open Brandon up to civil lawsuits, corporate penalties, and board scrutiny. Celine knew the risks, but she thought Brandon would protect her. Until he didn't return her calls after the baby shower. Until she showed up at his office and was told he was in meetings. Until she opened her apartment door to find an envelope from Brandon's legal team, politely instructing her to take an indefinite leave of absence for the good of the brand. Celine went pale. She wasn't just being benched. She was being cut. Like so many women before her, she had mistaken power for loyalty. But Celine wasn't about to disappear quietly. She knew too much. Emails, photos, voice notes. Things Brandon would never want his board or his investors to see. She still had access to one of his cloud folders. Still had screenshots of a conversation where Brandon joked about cutting Emily off before the baby comes, just to teach her a lesson. If he thought he could use her and toss her away, he had underestimated the wrong woman. So she made a plan of her own, one that didn't just involve exposure, it involved humiliation. Celine wasn't going to play second anymore. She was going to be the storm. 2 weeks after the baby shower disaster, New York City's elite gathered for the biggest charity gala of the season, the Metropolitan Foundation's annual Winter Gold Ball. It was a black-tie affair hosted at the Grand Astoria Hotel, with diamond chandeliers, velvet drapes, and enough designer gowns to fund a small country. The city's billionaires, influencers, and politicians poured into the ballroom like royalty. Flashbulbs flickered. Paparazzi stationed outside snapped pictures of every arrival. Inside, champagne flowed, and the string quartet played Vivaldi as if nothing scandalous had happened in the world. But everyone was talking. About her. Emily Lancaster. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't even on the guest list. The last anyone had seen of her was that unforgettable baby shower meltdown, the one where she'd thrown Brandon out with his mistress in front of 50 horrified guests. That video had been replayed on every gossip site for days. Brandon, however, was expected. And so was Celine. The pair arrived early, draped in couture and fake confidence. Brandon wore a tailored black tux with a smug grin to match. Celine wore a metallic silver gown that clung to her like it was painted on. Her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. At 8 p.m. indoors, they walked through the ballroom with the kind of arrogance reserved for people who believe they've already won. Brandon shook hands. Celine posed. But what neither of them knew was that the real main event hadn't even entered the building yet. 30 minutes into the evening, the room shifted. A hush fell. The orchestra faltered. People turned. And then the double doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Emily Lancaster walked in, heads turned, mouths opened, phones lifted. She wasn't the same woman they remembered. Gone was the tired, heartbroken wife from the baby shower. Tonight she was a storm wrapped in satin. Her gown was custom, a deep emerald green that shimmered under the chandeliers like a living jewel. It hugged her 7 months pregnant figure with elegance and power. A high slit revealed toned legs. Her hair was in soft, vintage waves. Her makeup, flawless. But the real showstopper was who walked beside her. On her arm was none other than Alexander Crane. Yes, that Alexander Crane, the CEO of Crane Tech, a billionaire in his own right, known for being fiercely private and brutally intelligent. His presence alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But walking into a gala hand in hand with Emily Lancaster, that was war. Brandon choked on his drink. Celine's fake smile cracked. And Emily? She glided across the room like she owned it. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. "Is that her?" someone whispered. "That's Emily Lancaster." "Who's the guy?" "That's Alexander Crane. What is he doing here?" Alexander didn't smile. He didn't need to. His silent presence said everything. Emily wasn't alone. She was protected, respected, feared. The moment was electric. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. Every blogger, influencer, and gossip columnist in the room knew this night would go viral. Brandon tried to act cool. He pulled Celine closer, whispered something in her ear. She nodded, but her jaw was tight. Emily approached them slowly. She didn't stop until she stood directly in front of them. The tension could have cracked glass. "Brandon," she said softly, her voice calm and controlled. Brandon blinked. "Emily." Celine folded her arms. "Nice of you to show up." Emily tilted her head, her eyes locked on Celine's. "I don't take advice from women who sleep with other people's husbands." Celine flushed. Brandon cleared his throat. "This is a charity event. Let's be civil." Emily smiled. "Civil? You mean like when you brought your mistress to my baby shower?" Gasps erupted around them. Someone actually clapped. Alexander stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Emily's lower back. It was possessive, protective. Emily turned to the nearby cameras and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm here tonight to make a donation. $1 million to support women's shelters and single mothers." Applause broke out. Celine scoffed. "That's cute, playing the victim and the saint." Emily's eyes narrowed. "No, I'm done being the victim. I'm rewriting the story." With that, she turned and walked away, Alexander beside her. Brandon stood frozen, stunned, and humiliated. Celine whispered, "We should leave." But it was too late. The damage was done. Social media exploded. Emily Lancaster, pregnant power. Celine sits down. By morning, the entire world had seen it. And the Lancaster empire? It was about to crumble. The morning after the gala, Brandon Lancaster's phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, texts, emails. He tried to ignore them at first, thinking it was business as usual. Then the messages turned dark. "Bro, you good? Did you seriously let her show up with Alexander Crane? Check page 6. His heart dropped. He opened his phone and found the headline waiting like a death sentence. "Scorned and stunning. Emily Lancaster returns to gala with tech mogul, publicly confronts cheating husband." The article was brutal. It described everything in painful detail. The moment Emily arrived, the look on Brandon's face, the silence that fell over the room. Embedded in the article were clips from social media. Emily standing strong, Brandon speechless, Celine humiliated. The worst part? The footage was everywhere. CNN, TMZ, TikTok, even Forbes covered it, because Alexander Crane never attended public events, yet made an exception for Emily. Brandon threw his phone across the room. He had underestimated her, badly. His PR team was already panicking. His assistant, the new one, left a voicemail saying 2 sponsors had pulled out from an upcoming luxury condo launch. Investors were nervous. Board members were demanding a meeting. Celine sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through her own phone. "We're trending," she said, her voice flat. "But not in the way you wanted." He glared at her. "Why didn't you stop her?" Celine raised her eyebrows. "Stop her?" She walked in like a queen. "What was I supposed to do? Tackle her in a Valentino dress?" He stood up, pacing the penthouse in his rumpled tuxedo pants. The place smelled like whiskey and regret. "This is bad," he muttered. "Really bad." Celine crossed her arms. "Maybe you should have thought of that before bringing me to a baby shower." Brandon turned sharply. "Don't act like you didn't push for that. And you didn't have the balls to say no." She snapped back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with resentment and realization. They were no longer a team. They were 2 selfish people, clinging to a sinking ship. Brandon dressed in silence and headed to the office. When he arrived at Lancaster Tower, the tension was immediate. Staff avoided eye contact. The receptionist offered a strained smile. Inside the boardroom, his executives were already seated. Marla, the CFO, spoke first. "We need damage control." "Emily hijacked the narrative," said another, "and the internet's eating it up." Brandon held up his hand. "She made a scene. It'll blow over." "No, Brandon," Marla said, her voice sharp. "It won't." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were reports, social media metrics, investor sentiment, early morning press coverage. One quote stood out in bold. "Brandon Lancaster is not a leader. He's a liability." It was from a leaked internal message sent by one of his senior developers. "We're hemorrhaging credibility," Marla continued. "And you know what's worse? Crane Tech just announced a $10 million donation to Emily's Women's Initiative. They're calling it the Lancaster Response." Brandon's jaw clenched. "Let me handle it," he said. But the room was quiet. They didn't believe in him anymore. He left the meeting furious. In his office, he grabbed a bottle of bourbon and poured himself a glass, even though it was barely noon. He was losing control. And Emily? She was everywhere. She'd done interviews, nothing aggressive, just honest, graceful. She talked about betrayal, about finding strength, about choosing to stand up instead of fall apart. She didn't even mention Brandon by name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew. By the end of the week, he'd been asked to step down from 3 advisory boards. His name was scrubbed from a university's honorary donor page. One of his luxury condo projects was put on indefinite hold. And Celine? She was spiraling too. Without Brandon's protection, she was being investigated for fraud, thanks to her fake credentials and misuse of company funds. Her work visa? Revoked. She was facing deportation. One night, she showed up at Brandon's penthouse, mascara smudged and desperation in her voice. "You said you'd protect me," she cried. "You promised." Brandon looked at her coldly. "That was before you became a liability." She slapped him. Then she left. Brandon didn't chase her. He sat down at the grand piano Emily once played and stared at the keys. He hadn't touched it since she left. Now the silence was unbearable. Every room reminded him of her. The scent of her candles, the half-finished nursery, the chair where she'd read her baby books, laughing softly, and yet she was gone. Because of him. The man who had everything now had nothing. No wife, no child, no empire. Just empty walls and echoing regrets. He picked up his phone. His last message to Emily was still unread. "Please, let's talk." But she never responded. And deep down, Brandon knew why. Because the Emily he betrayed wasn't just a heartbroken wife anymore. She was a force of nature. And she wasn't done yet. While Brandon Lancaster unraveled in boardrooms and penthouses, Emily was writing the next chapter of her life, with a pen dipped in precision, not vengeance. What the world didn't know, what Brandon never knew, was that Emily wasn't just a victim or a wife with a broken heart. She was a strategist, a silent giant, and she had been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. 3 weeks before the baby shower, Emily met with a man named Martin Voss. Martin was an attorney, not just any lawyer, but the top legal advisor for Crane Tech. He had overseen mergers worth billions, but more importantly, he was Alexander Crane's most trusted ally. And Alexander trusted Emily. "Tell me everything," Martin said, pushing a leather folder toward her across a polished mahogany table. So she did. The fake business expenses, the shell companies, the fake visa Celine used to gain employment, the hush money Brandon had attempted to move discreetly through offshore accounts. Emily handed over photos, documents, and cloud backups. She had everything cataloged, dated, labeled. Martin sat back when she finished. "You've built a case stronger than most forensic accountants." She smiled softly. "I had time." Martin wasn't just impressed, he was alarmed. "Emily, this isn't just a scandal. This is corporate crime. He could face indictment." Emily nodded. "I don't want him in jail. I want him irrelevant." The plan began to unfold. But that wasn't the twist. The twist was Emily's lineage, something she had buried long ago. She wasn't just Emily from upstate New York. Her mother was Eleanor Marchand, a name most people hadn't heard since the 90s, when Eleanor walked away from one of America's oldest banking dynasties. The Marchand family ran Easton Financial, a powerhouse firm that once controlled 8% of the country's private capital. When Eleanor abandoned the Marchand name to raise her daughter in peace, she also left behind a trust fund, one she never accessed, one Emily never acknowledged. Until now. Eleanor passed away 2 years prior, leaving the trust worth $86 million to Emily. Emily never used it. She never needed to. She believed in earning her way, in building a life on love, not legacy. But love had failed her. So she opened the vault. With Martin's guidance, Emily launched her own venture, a philanthropic foundation under her legal name, Emily Marchand. The mission? To support single mothers, women in abusive relationships, and survivors of emotional betrayal. The logo was elegant, the mission statement clear, and her first public act? Donating $10 million in her own name, not as Emily Lancaster, but as Emily Marchand. The internet exploded. Who was this Emily Marchand? Was she the same woman from the baby shower video? News sites scrambled to connect the dots. And then came the reveal. Emily granted a single interview with Julia Raines of the New York Times, known for her integrity and restraint. In a sunlit garden cafe, wearing a simple cream blouse and sipping mint tea, Emily dropped the bombshell. "Yes," she said calmly, "I am Eleanor Marchand's daughter. I walked away from that life because I believed in love over legacy. I chose a quieter path, a simple one. But now I see there's strength in reclaiming your roots. And if I can use that power to help women who feel powerless, then it was never lost." The piece went viral. Suddenly, Emily wasn't just a jilted wife. She was a woman reborn, a billionaire heiress with a cause. Celine watched the article from a cafe in Paris, seething. Her attempts to sell her side of the story to tabloids were falling flat. No one cared. The world had moved on from her. Brandon read the article alone in his office, a glass of scotch in one hand, disbelief in the other. He had no idea she came from money. All those years he mocked her middle-class mindset. All the times he counted dollars while she clipped coupons, thinking she had nothing. She had more than him. She had power. Real, quiet, untouchable power. He tried to call her. Again. Voicemail. He tried emailing. No reply. Then he got a letter. Not from Emily. From her legal team. It was a warning. A final boundary. Do not contact her. Do not speak her name in public. Do not attempt to interfere with her foundation or her finances. If you do, legal action will follow. Brandon threw the letter across the room, but he knew it was over. Not just the marriage. His control, his narrative, his relevance. Emily didn't just survive, she evolved, and the world watched it happen, step by step, in real time. The baby she once feared would arrive into a broken home would now be born into an empire, one built on resilience, not deception. Emily wasn't hiding anymore. She had stepped into the spotlight, and she wasn't going anywhere. The transformation wasn't sudden, it was deliberate. It was built, step by step, like a cathedral, measured, unshakable, and built to last. Emily Lancaster, no Emily Marchand now, didn't just glow up, she evolved. She didn't do it for the cameras, she didn't do it for Brandon. She did it because she had to, because there was no going back. Once you've been broken, humiliated, and dismissed, you either shrink into the shadows or you rise. Emily chose to rise, and she did it in heels. The first thing to change was her wardrobe. Gone were the neutral cardigans and maternity leggings. In came structured blazers in bold colors, Italian silk, sharp collars, and heels that said, "Don't waste my time." Her personal stylist, a woman named Drea Martinez, became her silent weapon. "You don't need to scream to be heard," Drea told her during their first fitting. "You just need to walk in like the room owes you an explanation." Emily wore sapphire to her first foundation press conference, emerald to the board meeting at Easton Financial. Yes, that Easton Financial, the firm her family once controlled. And white, pure and commanding when she appeared on Good Morning America, talking about motherhood, betrayal, and rebuilding identity. She didn't cry. She didn't rant. She looked straight into the camera and said, "I thought my world ended when I was betrayed, but now I see it was just beginning." The audience roared. Twitter erupted. Emily Unbroken Marchand returns from bump to boss. She hired a private chef, a prenatal coach, a team of security advisors. She wasn't isolating, she was insulating. Her world was now designed around power, not comfort. At every step, she was strategic. She didn't engage with tabloids, she let her actions speak. She attended female founder conferences, sat on a panel with Michelle Obama, partnered with a UN Women Initiative to launch a global fund for vulnerable mothers in developing nations. One particularly viral moment happened at the Women of Wealth Summit, where a moderator asked her, "What do you say to people who think you're just another pretty face who got lucky?" Emily paused, smiled, and leaned in. "I say I wasn't lucky. I was underestimated. And that's always more dangerous." The room erupted in applause. Even seasoned CEOs stood. Meanwhile, Brandon watched from the sidelines, sinking deeper into obscurity. Investors avoided him. Board members didn't return his calls. Even real estate deals began slipping through his fingers. He was still rich, but he wasn't important. He had become a cautionary tale, a punchline. At one point, a meme circulated online, Brandon's stunned face at the gala, side by side with a roaring lioness, Emily. The caption read, "Don't poke the queen if you're not ready for the roar." But Emily didn't post it. She didn't need to. She wasn't petty, she was poised. Behind the scenes, she quietly bought shares in two of Brandon's former development firms. Not for revenge, for control. "If I own what he lost," she told Martin, her attorney, "he doesn't just lose his power, he loses his name." But perhaps the most dramatic moment of Emily's transformation came one Thursday afternoon in Midtown Manhattan. She stepped out of a matte black SUV in front of the Grand Lexington Tower, a place where the city's most powerful CEOs gathered. She was 9 months pregnant, her bump bold under a tailored navy dress, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Flanked by 2 advisors and a bodyguard, she walked through the marble lobby like she owned it. Because, as of that morning, she did. The March On Foundation had acquired the top 3 floors. The building's name would soon be changed to Marchand House. Reporters flocked. "Emily, is this a statement to your ex-husband?" one shouted. She paused at the entrance, turned slightly, and smiled. "No," she said. "This is a statement to every woman who ever thought she couldn't start over." Click. Flash. Viral. That evening, Brandon sat alone in his penthouse, watching the footage on mute. He stared at the screen like a man looking at a ghost. Only this ghost had become something divine. Celine was gone, his career was dust, and the only person he ever underestimated had just rewritten the skyline with her name on it. Emily didn't do it for revenge. She did it for freedom. But the moment of reckoning, that was still coming, because one more public showdown was about to unfold. And this time, everyone would be watching. It wasn't just a broadcast, it was a reckoning. A calculated, televised execution, not of a man, but of a myth. The myth that Brandon Lancaster had built around himself for nearly a decade. Successful entrepreneur, loyal husband, visionary leader. That myth was about to shatter. And Emily was holding the hammer. It started with a phone call from The Reveal, a nationally syndicated primetime investigative show that specialized in exposing corruption and high-profile scandals. The producers had been chasing Emily for weeks. She had turned down every offer, every exclusive, until now. Because this time, it wasn't about her pain. It was about truth and power and reclaiming the narrative once and for all. The special episode was titled, "The Face Behind the Fall, Brandon Lancaster Exposed." The promos teased everything: financial misconduct, corporate betrayal, infidelity, and emotional abuse. But they kept one thing secret, that Emily herself would be appearing. The night it aired, the country watched. From penthouses in Manhattan to dorm rooms in Iowa, screens lit up with curiosity and popcorn-filled hands. People who had followed every twist of Emily's rise were ready for what they thought would be the final chapter. They didn't know it was just the beginning of a new era. The episode began with footage of Brandon in his glory days, cutting ribbons, shaking hands, kissing his wife's cheek while cameras rolled. Then came the unraveling. Footage from the baby shower, from the gala, from boardrooms where his nameplate had been removed. Then came the interview. The screen faded to Emily, seated in a black high-backed chair, wearing a burgundy suit that radiated control. She looked straight into the camera. Her voice was calm. When someone you love betrays you, the first thing you question isn't them, it's yourself. Did I miss the signs? Was I not enough? But betrayal isn't about the one betrayed. It's about the betrayer, their cowardice, their hunger for power, their emptiness. She went on to detail, with surgical precision, the layers of deceit Brandon had hidden behind his charm. She didn't dramatize, she didn't embellish. She presented facts, paper trails, shell companies, signed affidavits, voice messages, Yes, actual recordings, where Brandon joked with a friend about how Emily will fold once the baby arrives. She's too soft for a fight. Viewers gasped. One audio clip revealed Brandon discussing his plan to move assets offshore, so the prenup won't even matter. Another showed Celine texting Brandon, "If she finds out, we'll spin it. Say she's emotional. Pregnant women are always dramatic." But it was the footage at the end that made history. Unseen until this moment, it showed Brandon, during a private call with a contractor, laughing as he said, "Honestly, I married her for optics. She was a good look, quiet, the kind you keep around until you don't need her anymore." Silence. The host turned to Emily in the studio. "Why release this now?" She didn't hesitate. Because silence is where people like Brandon thrive. But the moment we speak, they lose their power. The interview ended with a chilling line. "I was once his shadow. Now he lives in mine." The internet went berserk. Twitter exploded. TikTok flooded with reaction videos. YouTube breakdowns surfaced within hours. Hashtags trended worldwide. Emily Unleashed, Lancaster Lies, The Reveal. But while the world cheered Brandon, he was watching alone. In a dark apartment he now rented in Soho, stripped of his penthouse, his company, his influence. His phone buzzed non-stop, but not with support. Legal threats, sponsor withdrawals, former employees speaking out. The morning after the special aired, Brandon was served with formal charges: fraud, corporate misconduct, and breach of fiduciary duty. And Celine? She was nowhere to be found. Sources later claimed she fled the country 2 weeks earlier, selling exclusive rights to a memoir that would never see the light of day. Her name had become synonymous with scandal. No publisher wanted her story anymore. But Emily wasn't done. During the final minutes of the broadcast, she made an announcement. "I'm launching a national campaign called Know Your Worth, a mentorship and legal resource network for women facing betrayal, financial abuse, or manipulation in high-net-worth relationships." She looked into the lens. This isn't about revenge, it's about revolution. Standing ovation, online and in the studio. But her final mic drop moment came post-show. While exiting the set, she was swarmed by cameras. A reporter shouted, "What would you say to Brandon now?" Emily paused, looked directly at the lens and smiled. "I'd say thank you." "Thank you?" "Yes," she nodded. "He freed me. When he betrayed me, he gave me permission to become the woman I was always meant to be." And then she stepped into a black town car and disappeared into the night. The episode would go on to break viewership records. It would be studied in media classes. It would spark legislation discussions around financial abuse in marriages. But more importantly, it cemented Emily Marchand not just as a survivor, not just a woman scorned, but as a symbol of elegance, of strategy, of unshakable, undeniable power. The sun rose slowly over Manhattan, casting a golden hue over the skyline that once bore Brandon Lancaster's name. Now it shimmered off the newly christened Marchand House, a monument not just to wealth, but to resilience, reinvention, and revenge served ice-cold with a flawless smile. Inside its towering glass walls, Emily Marchand sat at the head of a polished conference table. She was days away from giving birth, her baby bump commanding the space like a crown. Around her sat lawyers, foundation directors, and campaign strategists. Her world had changed, not just externally with cameras and headlines, but internally. She had stepped into a version of herself that once felt impossible. She had buried the girl who tolerated, who stayed silent, who believed that love required sacrifice even when it hurt. And in her place stood a woman who knew her worth, her power, and her purpose. "Let's finalize the outreach," she said, scrolling through data on her tablet. "I want the mentorship chapters live in 10 cities by next quarter." "Yes, ma'am," her team replied. "Yes, ma'am." That title used to make her flinch. Now it made her smile. Emily had become a force, calculated but compassionate, fierce but fair, a beacon to millions of women who had watched her rise from shattered to sovereign. After the broadcast of The Reveal, her campaign Know Your Worth had received nearly 500,000 emails in the first 24 hours. Women around the world shared their stories, their scars, and their gratitude. She made it her mission not just to elevate herself, but to lift others with her. She hired women who had walked similar paths, survivors of manipulation, emotional abuse, and quiet betrayal. She turned pain into payroll, grit into guidance, and the world noticed. Time magazine named her Woman of the Year. Vogue put her on the cover with the headline, "The Soft Power of Emily Marchand." She declined to appear in tabloid interviews but granted airtime to small podcasts hosted by single moms and domestic violence survivors. She gave away money, but more importantly, she gave away a model, a blueprint for reclaiming your name, your narrative, and your next chapter. And when her baby arrived, a healthy baby girl named Aurora Eleanor Marchand, the internet once again erupted. Photos of Emily holding her daughter went viral, not because they were staged or sensational, but because they were real. No filters, no glam, just a woman who had been through hell, holding the reason she never gave up. "Why, Aurora?" one reporter asked at a press conference. "Because the darkest night gives birth to the brightest dawn," she replied. Brandon never saw the baby, not because Emily blocked him, but because he didn't try. After the reveal aired, he vanished from public life. His remaining assets were quietly liquidated to pay legal settlements. Rumor had it he was living abroad, somewhere in Europe, under a different name, surrounded by lawyers and loneliness. Celine was never heard from again. But Emily? She kept rising. She was invited to the United Nations to speak on financial transparency in high-net-worth divorces. She launched a documentary series showcasing stories like hers. She funded scholarships in her mother's name for young women escaping toxic homes. And once, at a Harvard panel on legacy, she said something that left the room in complete silence. "My daughter will never have to wonder what silence looks like," she said. "She'll know her mother fought with her mind, stood with her heart, and never apologized for choosing herself." Applause thundered. But behind all the headlines, all the cameras, there was still a quiet core to Emily. She never forgot the girl she used to be, the one in the tiny apartment, cutting coupons, praying her love would be enough. That girl didn't vanish. She evolved. And in every move she made, that girl whispered, "Remember who you were when no one was watching." One rainy evening, after putting baby Aurora to sleep, Emily stood alone on her balcony. The city glittered below. She clutched a cup of chamomile tea and let the silence wrap around her. Not the heavy silence of betrayal, but the soft, sacred stillness of peace. And then her phone buzzed. A message from a young woman in Ohio, 19, pregnant, scared. Emily read the message twice, her fingers pausing over the reply. Then she typed, "You are not broken, you are beginning. Tell me how I can help." That was her legacy. Not the millions, not the buildings, not the magazine covers, but the quiet, powerful reminder to every woman watching, you can survive, you can thrive, and one day they will regret ever thinking you were weak. But I don't just want to say goodbye. I want to leave you with something small, but powerful. A key word. A sentence I truly believe could be the start of a whole new chapter in your life. Know your worth. Because you know what? We, those of us who've been betrayed, dismissed, or pushed out of our own lives, we don't have to disappear. We just need to remember our worth. Quietly, clearly, powerfully. I want you to write it down, write in the comments below. Not for me, but for you. Know your worth. Write it, look at it, feel it, and trust me, the moment you put those words into the world, the universe starts moving with you. The moment you admit, "I deserve better," is the moment everything begins to change. And you know what? That phrase, "know your worth," isn't just for you. Someone out there needs to hear it today. And maybe you're the one who will inspire them, just by leaving a comment. So if this story felt personal, if it made you feel seen, understood, I invite you, hit that subscribe button. Here, I don't tell stories to teach you how to live. I tell them so you'll know one thing. You're not alone, and you deserve a new chapter, full of power, freedom, and light.